The moment she found her laptop open on her best friend's bed, she thought she was simply dealing with an invasion of privacy. What she discovered in the next few minutes would completely change the way she remembered 6 years of friendship. Her name isn't really Jess, and neither are the other names in this story. Some small details have also been changed because this is still an extremely personal experience. But the events themselves are real. She had known Jess since high school. For almost 6 years, they had been extremely close. They went to college together, lived in the dorms together, and eventually, during their junior year, moved into an off-campus 3-bedroom apartment. Their third roommate was a friend named Stacy. The 3 women got along. Stacy and the narrator weren't quite as close as she was with Jess, but there were never any serious problems. On weekends, they would often go out together, and from the outside, the apartment looked like a normal place shared by 3 college friends. Then spring semester arrived, and spring break was approaching. They started making plans for when everyone would go home. Stacy and the narrator were leaving on the same day. Jess planned to stay behind for one extra day because she said she had to work one final shift at her job. When the day finally came, the narrator said goodbye to Jess, expecting that they would probably see each other again the following day once everyone was home. Then she left. She had already been driving on the freeway for about 30 minutes when something suddenly occurred to her. Her laptop. She pulled over almost immediately. She searched through her bags, checked her backpack, and went through everything again, hoping she had somehow overlooked it. She hadn't. The laptop was still at the apartment. She stared ahead through the windshield, realizing what that meant. She would have to turn around. She desperately didn't want to make the trip back, but being without her computer for almost 2 weeks wasn't an option. So she turned the car around and started the half-hour drive back. At the time, she thought forgetting the laptop was nothing more than an annoying mistake. She had no idea that forgetting it would be the reason she discovered what her closest friend had been hiding. And when she finally walked back into that apartment, the first thing she noticed was that Jess wasn't answering, but her bedroom door was wide open. She unlocked the apartment and stepped inside. Jess. No answer. She called again, expecting to hear her friend somewhere inside. Nothing. That alone wasn't enough to alarm her. Jess could have stepped out for a moment, but then she noticed something that felt wrong. Jess's bedroom door was wide open. Normally, Jess kept it closed, especially when she wasn't home. The narrator went into her own bedroom first and began searching for the laptop. She checked everywhere she could think of, moving through her belongings again and again. Nothing. Then, almost out of curiosity, she walked toward Jess's room. She stopped in the doorway. There, sitting open on Jess's bed beside Jess's own laptop, was hers. For a moment, the only thought in her mind was confusion. Why was her laptop in Jess's room? And why hadn't Jess called or texted her? She walked over and picked it up. Then she saw something that made her stomach drop. Her laptop was already signed into her account. Somehow, Jess had gotten into it, which meant Jess knew her password. She turned toward Jess's computer. That was when everything became much worse. A folder was open on the screen. Inside were photographs. Photographs of her. At first, she couldn't process what she was looking at. Then she recognized herself in picture after picture. Some showed her passed out on the couch after nights of drinking. Others showed her wearing only a towel, either in her bedroom or in the bathroom. These weren't photographs she had willingly taken or shared. Someone had been taking pictures of her when she didn't know they were being taken. And that someone was her closest friend. Her heart began pounding so hard she could feel it in her chest. She closed her laptop. Then she started searching Jess's room. She went through the closet, and there, mixed among Jess's belongings, she found things that belonged to her. Clothing, personal belongings, items she knew she hadn't given Jess permission to take. Some of the things she found were so personal and embarrassing that she still doesn't want to describe them. She gathered everything she could carry. She didn't wait for Jess to return. She didn't confront her. She stormed out of the apartment, locked the door to her own bedroom, and got back into her car. Only once she was sitting behind the wheel did she call her parents. She told them what she had found. For a moment, neither of them seemed to know what to say. There wasn't really advice they could give. The situation was too disturbing. Then, before she even got home, another realization hit her. Jess had blocked her. Instagram, Snapchat, everything. The person she had trusted for almost 6 years had disappeared from her life without a confrontation. And somehow, that silence made everything feel even more unsettling. She assumed Jess had probably blocked her phone number too, but she never tried calling to find out. There was nothing left to say. When she returned to the apartment about a week and a half later, Jess's belongings were gone. Every trace of her had been removed. The apartment was still standing exactly where they had left it, but the meaning of the place had changed completely. The bedroom, the closet, the doors, the ordinary spaces where they had spent months together. Now all of them carried a question she couldn't answer. How long had this been happening? She wouldn't see Jess again for almost an entire year. Then, unexpectedly, they crossed paths while Jess was out with mutual friends. The narrator saw her. Jess saw her too, but Jess wouldn't look at her. There was no explanation, no confrontation, no attempt to defend herself. She couldn't even seem to gather the courage to face the person whose privacy she had violated. Eventually, the narrator realized just how deeply disturbing the truth was. The woman she had considered her best friend for 6 years had been secretly photographing her, accessing her computer, taking her belongings, and keeping private things that never belonged to her. But discovering those things also forced her to remember something that had happened months earlier. It had happened during their first month in the apartment. One night, the narrator had been drinking with friends. Eventually, she went to bed. She remembered falling asleep. Then, sometime later, she woke up. The apartment was quiet. For a few seconds, she didn't know what had disturbed her. Then she heard something, a sound coming from her closet. She sat upright, still groggy. She rubbed her eyes and stared toward the closet. She thought she saw someone. She thought she heard someone inside. Fear took over before she could even figure out what was happening. She got out of bed and ran. She went straight to Stacy's room because it was closer. She was screaming by the time Stacy opened the door. The two of them went back to the narrator's room to check. The closet was empty. There was no one hiding inside. At the time, the narrator had no explanation for what she had seen or heard. Eventually, the incident was pushed into the back of her mind. Until she found the photographs. Until she found her belongings. Until she realized Jess had apparently been watching her without her knowledge. Suddenly, that old memory didn't feel mysterious anymore. It felt like a warning she hadn't understood. The more she thought about that night, the worse it became. She remembered waking up confused. She remembered staring toward the closet. She remembered the feeling that someone was there. And most importantly, she remembered that Jess had supposedly never woken up during the commotion. At the time, that seemed strange. The narrator had been frightened enough to run through the apartment screaming for Stacy. Yet Jess apparently hadn't come to see what was happening. After everything she later discovered, that detail became impossible to ignore. She began wondering whether Jess had actually been asleep that night, or whether she had been awake, whether she had been in the closet. The thought made her physically sick, because the photographs had already proven that Jess was capable of entering private spaces, taking pictures without permission, and stealing personal belongings. Now the narrator had to reconsider an incident she had once dismissed as a strange, drunken memory. What if she really had seen someone? What if the person she thought was in her closet had actually been Jess? There was no way to prove it. Jess was gone. The apartment had been cleared of her things. Their friendship was over. And there would never be an explanation for everything that happened behind closed doors. That uncertainty was perhaps the hardest part. She could identify the photographs. She could identify the belongings. She knew Jess had accessed her laptop. She knew Jess knew her password. Those were facts. But there were other moments she could no longer separate from suspicion. How many times had Jess entered her room? How many times had she been watched without knowing? How many things had been moved, taken, or photographed? And how much of her private life had Jess been secretly observing? There were no answers. The narrator had spent years believing that the person beside her was someone she could trust completely. They had gone through high school together. They had gone to college together. They had lived together. They had shared weekends, conversations, routines, and the ordinary details of their lives. That history made the discovery more disturbing, not less. This wasn't a stranger hiding somewhere outside the apartment. It wasn't an unknown person breaking into her home. It was someone who already had a key. Someone who knew the layout of the apartment. Someone who knew when she was home. Someone who knew when she was asleep. And someone she had once called her best friend. The most frightening part wasn't what she knew. It was everything she couldn't know. Because once trust disappears, even old memories can become evidence in your mind. And that night by the closet was now impossible for her to remember the same way again. Nearly a year passed before the narrator and Jess crossed paths again. There was no dramatic confrontation. No confession. No explanation that could make sense of what had happened. Jess simply wouldn't look at her. And perhaps that silence said more than any explanation could have. The narrator had once known Jess as the person she could tell everything to. Now she had to live with the knowledge that the person she trusted most had secretly invaded the most private parts of her life. She had seen the photographs. She had found her belongings in Jess's closet. She had discovered that her laptop had been accessed. And she had learned that Jess knew her password. Those were the things she could prove. But the unanswered questions were what stayed with her. What had happened when she was asleep? What had happened when she was drunk? How many times had Jess entered her room? How long had the photographs been taken? How many photographs existed that she never found? And what else had Jess taken that she hadn't recognized as missing? The old closet incident became especially difficult to live with. Before discovering everything else, she could tell herself that she had simply been drunk, half asleep, frightened, and mistaken about what she saw. But after finding the photographs and belongings, that explanation no longer felt sufficient. She remembered sitting up. She remembered looking toward the closet. She remembered believing someone was inside. She remembered running to Stacy's room. And she remembered that Jess supposedly never came to investigate. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe there wasn't. She would never know. That is what makes the story so disturbing. There is no supernatural explanation waiting at the end. No monster. No mysterious disappearance. No impossible event. Just a real person who had been trusted enough to get close. Someone who apparently used that trust to cross boundaries that should never have been crossed. The narrator eventually left the situation behind as much as anyone can leave something like this behind. But the memory remains. Not because of one photograph. Not because of one stolen piece of clothing. Not even because of the laptop. It remains because of the question that cannot be answered. When she was asleep in that apartment, surrounded by someone she believed was her friend, was she ever truly alone? She may never know what happened in that closet. She may never know how many moments she completely missed. And that uncertainty is what still makes her sick to her stomach. Because sometimes the most frightening thing isn't discovering that someone was watching you. It's realizing how long they may have been watching before you ever noticed.